Hello, fellow crafters. This is Yana Smakula for SimonsSTM.com. Welcome back for another Yippee For Yana video. In this episode, I will show you how to create a colorful autumn card featuring emboss resist technique. I'm starting to work on my card by heat embossing a background. For this, I'm using a Misty stamping tool. I've already placed a new pinecone background stamp inside my Misty and have added a sheet of white cardstock. To make sure my embossing is going to be neat, I'm treating the paper with anti-static powder. I like to tap on my anti-static powder tool from the back and spread the powder around the paper using a dry paint brush. Next, I'm using Simon's clear embossing ink and inking up the stamp, making sure to cover its entire surface. Next, going to flip the door of my Misty and apply firm pressure to transfer the ink onto the paper. I love using Misty for large 6x6 background stamps such as this one, as I'm able to always get perfect results. I'm using Simon's Fine Detail Clear Embossing Powder here. I picked the fine embossing powder as this background has a ton of intricate details to it, and using a regular embossing powder will not do the trick as it will obliterate a lot of that detail. So make sure you use the proper kind of embossing powder when working with detailed backgrounds such as this one. The next step is, of course, heat setting the powder. I'm preheating my heat tool to get it nice and hot and slowly melting the powder section by section. You probably cannot see any of that on camera as the cardstock is white and the embossing powder, once melted, also looks white or clear. But as soon as I start adding the ink onto the background, you'll be able to see the design. With the background embossed, it's time to add some color. Now, because we embossed this design in clear embossing powder on white cardstock, the powder will resist the ink and will allow the white background show through. It's a very old technique, yet still one of my favorites to use for quick and easy backgrounds. I trimmed the background paper to about 6x6 inches to make it more manageable in size. I did not cut my paper to size right away, as I prefer to work with larger sheets when I'm stamping 6x6 backgrounds. This way I can use magnets to hold the paper in the Misty instead of having to tape the paper down using repositionable adhesive. I picked 4 colors of ink for my ink blending, and I tried to go with a fall color combination. I have red lipstick, coral reef, green apple, and sunshine. So a hint of red, plenty of orange, just a little bit of green, and some yellow to complete the mix. I am using Ranger round ink blending tools for the ink blending, but I have these Spellbinders foams attached to them, so not the Ranger foam. The Spellbinders foam is made from a different material, and it sort of resembles a makeup sponge, so it applies and blends the ink much better. I'm adding circles of color here and there on the paper, slowly filling it with color. You can see how that white, or rather that clear embossing, is resisting the ink and pops against that vivid fall background. The Pinecone's background stamp is very versatile, and I personally think it is a great design for fall. When looking at this ink-blended background, I see a lot of colorful fall leaves in the background that are represented by the ink-blended pops of color. Now, one of the things I don't quite like about ink blending over embossed image is the fact that the ink sometimes gathers and sits on the embossing powder, distorting its color. I have quite a bit of that here on this background. It's kind of hard to see, but it is there because the embossed areas are not true white. Now, I found a simple trick to remove the ink residue from embossing powder. I use a stamp cleaning solution. This is Ultra Clean from Hero Arts, and a paper napkin. I spray just a little bit of the cleaner onto the napkin and gently wipe the background. Do be careful and mindful, as this can also take the ink off your paper and leave streaky marks. So be gentle and careful with wiping the background using this method. You can see how big of a difference it made and how easy it was to do. Next, I'm trimming this background down to size. I want it to be just short of 4 by 5¼ inches. I also want to frame the edges of this panel in a way, and I'm doing this by applying embossing ink directly onto the edge of the paper. I want the edge to look as if it is dipped in gold paint. So with the embossing ink applied, I'm dipping the edge of the panel into a pool of antique gold embossing powder, and I'm doing so to all 4 edges. I did get a bit too much powder here, so I'm brushing some of it away using a dry paintbrush, keeping just a minimum amount on the edge. And now I'm ready to heat set it with my heat tool and melt the powder. This is one of my favorite tricks for framing a panel. Very easy to do and looks fabulous every time. Okay, I went ahead and foam mounted the panel onto A2 white top folding card base. I used Simon's pre-made card bases for this. I've also already heat embossed a sentiment. It reads "Welcome Autumn" and comes from the Autumn Greetings stamp set. I heat embossed it in white embossing powder on schoolhouse red cardstock. I did so 3 times and trimmed those sentiments to 3 skinny strips. Now I'm using a ruler and grid lines of my grid paper to align and foam mount these strips onto my background. Lastly, I'm going to decorate the card using some sequins and clear droplets. I'm using the autumn leaves sequin mix and adhering everything in place with the help of my Crystal Katana pickup tool and Simon's Craft Tacky Glue. And our card is done. I hope you'll give this idea a try using these or other stamps from your stash. If you do, remember to share online and tag us on social media. We always love seeing what you guys are making. On the screen, there is a link to a playlist with all of my videos featuring Simon Says stamps. Subscribe now not to miss any new card making videos. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next week.